Welcome everyone to another AZ Ray video. Today we're going to talk about Parthenope. Thank you guys for watching this video. I'm really excited to get into it. Before we get into it though, I'm going to give you a spoiler warning. But the spoiler warning for this one is going to be a little bit different. Why? Because it's a surrealist film. And a surrealist film essentially means that it's a film that plays off of psychology. It also plays off different metaphors and symbols and similes. So even though I'm giving you my interpretation of it, you guys may watch the film and get something completely different from it. So I'm going to give you like my feedback and my viewpoints from it, but you might get something completely different from it. But either way, if you've never watched this type of film before, I still think watching this video will kind of help you. It'll be like a helpful exercise because it'll help you kind of be more aware of these hidden symbols because once again, because it's a surrealist film, this isn't one of those films that makes the answer super obvious. It's up to the viewer to interpret. Some directors like to have the audience interpret their own meanings from the film, and this is definitely one of those types of films. So, spoiler warning once again, we're going to have timestamps as we always do in all our videos and the description below. So choose your own journey if you want to skip ahead, or you can just watch this video through, like I said, because I'm going to be talking about the plot, but because it's surrealist, it's kind of hard for me to spoil. This is one of those unique films where I'm kind of not going to spoil too much, but at the same time I am. I know it sounds weird, but it's because it's surrealist. All this can be like interpreted in different ways. So we're going to get into it, guys. So Parthenope. So the director, created this type of film so the viewer can interpret it however the viewer wants it. Timestamps are going to be below, but don't worry. Just want to give you guys that heads up before we get started. Now, before we talk about the film itself, I also want to touch on another topic because this film has to do with anthropology. So I thought this was a perfect opportunity to talk about a little bit of anthropology because I get this question all the time. Why do you talk about movies and films, and why do you talk about all these different types of topics? Well, it has to do with the nature of the field of anthropology in general. Anthropology is essentially a career about like research. Sometimes it's also known as an ethnologist. There's different terms of it, but we're going to use anthropology. It's the most widely used term. And it's broken down in a couple different ways. In the Americas, it's broken down with 4 different branches. You have cultural anthropology, you have physical anthropology, also known as biological anthropology. You have archaeology, and you have linguistics. So if you notice, the first one I said was cultural anthropology. If you think about culture, culture is everywhere. Culture is in everything that we do. It's in everything around you. It's in the music, in your environment, anything you can think of. In food, it exists all around the world. So it's the reason why film and movies and anime is a way to kind of talk about culture. Because sometimes it's easy to talk about things when we're looking from the outside and we can reflect on other topics and it makes us understand different topics better. So that's the reason why I'm open to different comments and from suggestions from subscribers just like you guys. So I thought this was a perfect film to talk about anthropology. That's why I'm breaking that down. And yeah, so I thought it was a perfect opportunity to break that down and talk about anthropology. And yeah, so hopefully that clears some things up for you. And this film mentions anthropology. Of course I was going to talk about it. It's my obligation. Just kidding. Kind of not kidding, but you know what I mean. So the way we're going to break this film down is that first we're going to talk about the myth of Parthenope, and then we're going to talk about Naples from the 1960s and 70s. Then we're going to talk about the different symbols and hidden meanings of the film. And then we're going to talk about beauty, since beauty is a huge topic in the film. And then we're going to talk about the ending explained, the interpretations that I got from the ending. And then lastly, the movie review. All right, guys, let's rock and roll. So the myths of Parthenope. There's a bunch of different myths. They all kind of end kind of sad, unfortunately. It doesn't work out for our heroine. There's one version where she's like heartbroken because she didn't end up with Ulysses, which is essentially the Odysseus. It's just how they translate it in Italian. And she gets sad. She throws herself into the sea. Her body gets buried in Megaride Island, and that becomes associated with a very prominent island in Naples, right? And there's another version of it where she falls in love with a centaur. It doesn't work out. And then you get this theme. It doesn't work out. There's one version of it too where it does work out for her. She ends up mothering 12 children. and she ends up becoming arguably like the mother of Naples. So that's her story in a nutshell. Different versions of it. She's this tragic figure, and in many ways, the mother of Naples or Naples itself. So that's what this film kind of leaves the viewer thinking with, right? Some of the main symbols that we can see just with the main character of Parthenope is that we see that she's literally like a what if a goddess came to Earth in the real world, how would she interact? So she's like a goddess literally in some aspect of it, right? This like divine thing. Or another version of it, she's just a regular woman. She's like a regular, beautiful woman that has to just navigate the world. Or a third reason is that she's like the literal personification of Naples. So you can either agree that she's either three of these things, two of these things, one of these things, but this is how we're going to start this like surrealist journey of these different symbols, right? She represents all these different things. As we follow this character into this journey, it takes us into the next part of the thing that we're talking about is the 1960s and 70s. And the 1960s and 70s were a very prominent time in Italy. As we talked about in another video, 1960s and 70s was the boom of the space era and the boom of the automobile industry of Italy. It was seen as this amazing miracle after all the rubble and tragedy that Italy experienced after the cost of World War II. Yeah, I talk about this in my Fantastic Four video, so if you guys want to check it out, definitely check that video out. But so we see this booming era that's happening in the 1960s and 70s. And as we have the economy going up, we also have this dark side that's also happening at the same time. It's the rise of mafias. Yes, you could argue mafias are technically not bad since they only exist because they try to combat and help the people where the government isn't helping, but take that for what you want. We have both sides of these things happening at the same time. And we see the character's journey. It's pivotal, right? Because Paolo Sorrentino talks about one of the biggest takeaways that he wants people to get is how people hold on to core memories. Because core memories play a key role in our lives because as we go old and time passes, there are certain memories that hold on to us, that identify us, and they're the ones that we remember the most. Sure, we have other memories, but we need to be reminded of them. But we have certain core memories that stick to us, good or bad, that stick in our lives. So the way this film is done, it's kind of done in this episodic format. And we see this character, Parthenope, encounter all different kinds of people throughout the film. And we see these different episodes, and arguably these episodes are the biggest memories that are impacted her life. So in the 1960s and 70s, we see her experiencing both of these things. We see her experiencing the good and the bad. I would argue that we're seeing the character's journey navigating the world, right? We have her going through the good, younger stuff where she's kind of having fun and having the good times. And then she slowly descends to the bad when she starts exposing herself to like mafia and things like that. And she arguably meets the quote unquote devil, however you want to interpret that. And then she goes for a downfall, and she goes from a demise, and then she rises back up again. And that's kind of the arc that happens between the 60s, 70s, and concludes in the 80s. And then, it takes us to a future time in the film as well. So the 60s and 70s are a crucial period because it's a big boom in Naples, in Italy. And it's also a pivotal age for Neapolitan cinema as well. So now we're going to get into different symbols. So some of the symbols that are very important in the film are, I already kind of touched on some, like the mafia and whatnot, but we have a pivotal character in the film that's named as Greta Cool. Paolo Sorrentino already said that she is not based on Sophia Loren, so we have to analyze who could this character be. And honestly, this was very hard for me. And the team here at AZ Ray Videos, it was hard for us to figure this out. So maybe you guys might have a better luck than us. But I put 3 possible theories of who this woman could possibly be, right? We have this scorned woman that's kind of upset at Naples in general, right? And I kind of gave you an idea of why, right? Because in many ways, as we said earlier, this film is kind of like a love letter to Naples, right? Parthenope represents Naples, and the director's from Naples. So we have this love connection from Naples. But The director didn't make it like sunshine and roses, right? The director was honest, right? The Naples has some good things and has some bad things about it. So the fact that this actress Greta Cool, who tries to be some kind of mentor figure to the character of Parthenope, you could see her upsetness is kind of validated. As I break down these potential actresses that she could be based off of, you start kind of seeing the patterns and the reasons why, like, oh, maybe her reasons were validated. Because unfortunately, the thing about the 60s and 70s is that filmmaking was very exploitative to women, right? They were forced to be like casted in these different roles, and they didn't have a lot of controls of their careers. And if they were to do anything that was against or counter, they were shunned upon. And you're going to see these themes in all these different actresses, and you can see their frustrations because they weren't allowed to be people. They were just used as props and tools, right? So the first person that I think that Greta Cool could be based off of is Claudia Carinale. She was forced to have these roles as like a prostitute. She was like the seductress. She forced men to take this line of partition. She like, she was forced to play these roles, and she was an amazing actress that was forced to like, use her beauty and all, and being like, she's always manipulative with it, right? She's also famously in Eight and a Half, an iconic film by Federico Fellini. She's personified as the ideal woman. She represents that in this film as well too, right? The pressures of being the ideal woman, and you could see some potential connections between the ideal woman of Eight and a Half, because there's this famous quote that says, "Being beautiful and ancient." Probably a way of interpreting that as like timeless beauty, but it's also because of the cultural obsession with beauty. I'm going to talk about that later, but there's like this obsession with it. People that like, it's this timelessness to it. It's like this extra value that we value, right? And so Claudia Carinale is a representative of this whole thing regarding the whole like ideal woman, right? She was extremely popular in the 60s. And she was even part of an initiative that moved successful European actresses to star in American films. And you can imagine how strenuous that is to be there for 3 years in another country and to having to do all that. And her beauty was so well known in the 60s and 70s. And her image was even used on a Bob Dylan cover against her will. She was used for the Bob Dylan's 1966 gatefold vinyl case for the album Blonde on Blonde. It's crazy. And yeah, the original copy of it, the original case, is actually seen as a collector's item, since she threatened to sue because of the exploitative nature that, she wasn't even asked for her likeness. She's also fluent in a bunch of different languages. She knew Arabic, French, Italian, English, and Spanish. She celebrated her 80th birthday in Naples. And she also, the reason why she's connected with Naples too, because she says like the only love of her life that she's ever had was in Naples too. So all these actresses have some kind of connection to Naples, since this film is about Naples. So that was the route that I was trying to take. Like, who was a prominent 1960s and 70s actress that had a strong connection to Naples? Now we have the second candidate that could potentially be the metaphor who was Greta Cool, and that's Monica Vitti. Monica Vitti is known as the queen of Italian cinema. She was very beloved and appreciated for her talents. And she was known for having like a hypnotizing beauty, a very strong actress that wasn't trained. She even like ran away from home and became an actress. It was something that she was very, very passionate about. So you could understand any woman's frustration when it's like, this is something that she really wanted to do. She wasn't one of those actresses not to insult these women that do this way, but a lot of women get like recruited for their beauty. They get recruited from like beauty pageants or fashion models. This is someone who wanted to do it from like a very young age. So she was a passionate actress, and in some ways she wasn't able to fully explore what she wanted to do, right? Because as I stated earlier, there were some limitations in the film industry due to sexism and the patriarchy and whatnot. She spent her childhood in Naples. She like spent a majority of her life in Naples, but due to the war, she had to move. She had a very strong association with Naples. She even came back to perform an Arthur Miller play as well. She was so popular. She was even on an Italian postage stamp. Monica Vitti ended up passing away in 2022, and she passed away of dementia when she was 90. So that takes us to our third one, which is Rafaella. She was like an international icon. She's an LGBTQ icon as well. She was also a pop icon. She was also popular in Latin America. She was this very well regarded singer actress, definitely seen as a sex symbol as well. In 1971, she became the first woman on television to show her navel. And that became like this big outrage and whatnot. And she arguably was a catalyst or one of the catalysts that started this new era of like freedom of expression and whatnot. And so she's this very strong-willed woman, and her association with Naples is because she had a close relationship with Diego Maradona, which played for the famous Napoli team, and that Napoli team was featured on a famous television series called Caramba. And yeah, this famous television series Caramba was like huge, and there was a lot of, and it was there was a big part that was centered around Naples as well. So that's her connection to Naples. So yeah, those are my possible connections who I think Greta Cool is. I think the one I feel kind of the most confident about is kind of Monica Vitti, but your guess is as good as mine. Honestly, I did a lot of extra work to just try to figure out if I could pinpoint who Greta Cool is. But on some level, it doesn't really matter because she just represents a torn, scorned woman that was manipulated by her beauty and wasn't allowed to fulfill her dreams. In many ways, it could kind of like foreshadow the potential that of any beautiful woman that's not allowed to like have like a fulfilling life, right? Such as like the tragic stories of Parthenope itself, like the original myth, or just women in general. And she's in many ways kind of represents Naples because of all these like dualities and like the good and the bad and all these different tensions that happen in the region. So yeah, those are my thoughts on the whole Greta Cool thing. And now the next symbol is the baby. So we have a baby that's seen towards the end of the film. And this baby, right, you can interpret a couple different ways, right? I know some people think the baby is supposed to be like the exact opposite of our main character, Parthenope. The baby's ugly, the main character is beautiful. I see it a different way. I think the baby just represents the dependence that his father has, and his father is like a mentor character for Parthenope, and it just represents that he's just going to be a baby, and he's a baby, and he's dependent on his father, and no matter what happens, whatever kind of ailment, um, this capacity or whatever kind of disability that the baby may have, all we know as the viewer is that this baby needs his father's help. And so it's kind of exaggerated in this giant baby format. Like, yeah, he's a giant baby. And the dad, whether he likes it or not, has to take care of his son. But he says it all the time that he loves his son, he loves his bond, he loves this relationship. There's another aspect to it too. We don't know Parthenope is like a reliable narrator. This could all just be like an exaggeration of her memory. We don't really know. And then the other thing too, the baby could also be a representative of kind of like the babification of future generations. I'm sure you hear this kind of stuff all the time. They're like, oh, people were tougher and grittier back then. People are now more babyfied and kind of like, they're not as tough as older generations, right? So it could be a slight little commentary on that as well. And that also takes us to another important symbol, which is the priest. And the priest arguably is straight up the devil. Characters say that he's the devil. So the sake of this video, we're going to say he's the devil. Because even if he isn't or isn't the devil, he still represents the biggest regret of the main character of Parthenope's life. Because it's a crazy thing that she was able to do these controversial activities with the priest. And it's horrifying, it's contradictory, and I'm sure it's also talking about, the manipulations of the Catholic Church and the hypocrisy of the Catholic Church, how they try to be one thing and they end up doing another thing. They say they're holy, but they're manipulative, and they demand money. Money is the only thing they can't figure out and whatnot. There's a bunch of different layers that you can criticize any church or any religion, right? So it can represent that exploitation too. And so, yeah, I think that one, for me, that was pretty cut and dry. That person's the devil. And even if it's not the devil, right, it's like a big regret. It's this big, heavy turning point that arguably shifts the main character's career. And she is able to be a very successful anthropologist in the film. And now this takes us to our next section. Not that we're done with the symbols, we're going to talk about beauty. Beauty is arguably the most controversial section of this entire film. This is honestly what turns people off the film, because some people, they see this film, they're like, oh, the film is just about a hot girl. And honestly, I think that's very oversimplistic. There's a way more deeper messages. And if you really analyze all the symbols into the film, there's way more going on than that. But at the same time, beauty in general is a complex issue. Beauty, the world has this like obsession for beauty. Beauty becomes connected with attraction, and it becomes fixated in your brain. When you find something or someone beautiful, it stays in your brain for a while. Sometimes you can't help it. Some people would even argue that if a person can't overcome this beauty, it's usually because they can't overcome lust, which there could be truth to that. People should definitely try to overcome lust for sure. But at the same time, analyzing this for just the beauty aspect of it, what would the world be without any beauty? Would there be any art? Would there be music? What would the world be without beauty? Who knows, right? It becomes this big issue, this big crux of the film. And researchers like Anna Cakston, Miranda Van Revujic, and Moreau, they talk about the benefit of having positive sexual experiences, and it boosts someone's confidence, and it gives them good empowerment with their identity, because all the sexual acts in this film were done with consent. We can see this validation that happens within the character, and it's a very empowering thing. Yes, there's power dynamics and gender dynamics, non-gender binary, all those things also play a role as well. But if a person's getting a positive experience while they're having sexual experiences, it's very positive as well. And I know this is controversial as well, because I know, in some religions, some belief systems, just talking about sex is just like, it's seen as improper and polite, but it's actually healthy to kind of have these type of conversations, because people do experience these phenomenons. So it's important to have this dialogue, especially for women who often are non-gender binary in general. LGBTQI, non-binary, they deal with all these types of things, and if there is no dialogue and there's no conversation about it, it's also detrimental as well. So now that we have these different layers of beauty, right? How beauty and attraction plays all these different roles. We also have the complexities of being a woman and these pressures of trying to be a homemaker, trying to be beautiful, trying to have a career, and being forced to choose or navigate and juggle all those different things. I talk about these themes, and another film I talked about, The Substance. I talk more in depth about like beauty, isolation, nostalgia. So we have all these different reflections when it comes to beauty, right? And this main character has these very unrealistic expectations of beauty. And through her dark turn with her experience with the devil, she's able to realize and validate herself, because she has all these other aspects going out. She's incredibly intelligent. She's incredibly gifted. She has all these tools, and she's able to become a successful anthropologist, right? Some people argue that the film never answers the question, what is she thinking? What is she thinking? And it does. It says it a couple times. It says that the film argues and states that she's always trying to think of the right things to say. And yeah, it comes off like a smooth line because she wants to always think of the right response. She talks about seduction. She even says that sex kills attraction. It kills that part of it because it kills the mystery, right? But what she's also talking about is these pressures, these unrealistic pressures of being this myth, of being this mother of Naples, of being Naples herself, of being this woman. There's like all these different like unrealistic expectations of her. She's just a person, right? Or maybe she's not. Depends on your surrealist interpretation of this, but either way, right? So, and this takes us to A final note on beauty, which is said by a character, John Cheever. John Cheever is a famous novelist and he's a short story writer. And he's like this historical fiction part of the film, where even he says this famous line that beauty is like war, it opens doors, right? Because beauty, it kind of makes me think of Agamemnon. There's different wars that were fought over women, over beauty, but beauty can definitely open doors, right? And it's also something that can limit people, because if people only identify themselves as their beauty, it becomes a priority in what they value within themselves. And that's it. It's tricky, right? And to say that beauty is like a war, on many levels, I'm sure women would agree that beauty is kind of like a war, right? There's a lot of expectations and things that they have to like live up to and whatnot, and all these unrealistic pressures. So that's a final note on beauty. Now we're going to talk about the ending explained. Like the ending explained. So like it's going to be pretty spoilerific, all right? And it's going to be pretty spoilerific and it gets a little weird too. But yeah, so just kind of a heads up. It's the ending explained. It's like spoilers, bro. Come on. Or spoilers do that. Or non-gender binary. Or elephant. Or armadillo. Yeah, I don't know. Okay. So yeah, the ending explained. So, characters ask her like, "Hey, how come you never got married?" She's this older woman now, being a successful anthropologist, being recognized for awards, and she says because she was never officially asked, which isn't, which is she's right, but she was attempted to kind of sort of be proposed by her childhood sweetheart, but it was hard for her to accept this proposal because of the controversial circumstances of how they kind of ended their relationship, because it was associated with her brother's suicide, since her brother was obsessed with her beauty. And as much as he tried to like find love and attractions with other women, he was always depressed because his sister was on his mind, right? So there's this weird, it never gets fully incestuous, but it's weird. But I think it just goes back to, like the whole mythology thing. There's a bunch of incest in mythology. The film kind of flirts with it, not that it actually talks about it, but it could also be a metaphor too of just like wrongful, sinful acts of youth, or however you want to personify it. And then right when the credits end, you hear a voice say, which is arguably the priest, the devil, that God hates the water, right? And he's referring to Parthenope, because a lot of her symbols is connected with water, right? She's connected with this island, and she's arguably kind of isolated. She's like an island, this island associated with Naples, water. And why would God hate water, right? If you think about the very nature of water, is that it's hard to control water. If God made water, could he control it? And arguably, maybe he doesn't, because of free will, right? And water is a force of nature. It causes tsunamis, it causes floods, it causes destruction. But it's also the healing force of life. It has layers to it. It has dimensions. It has duality to it. Water can do a lot of things. So I think that's the biggest takeaway of the film. And I would argue that the main character got her happy ending, and that she got her successful career, and she was happy in contrast to her mythological counterparts. So I enjoy the film. Now let's get to our final section, the movie review. This was one of the hardest movie reviews for me to do, because I truly enjoyed this film. I thought this film had so much going on and had a lot of depth. But I have to be honest with you guys. And as I created my scale, I know if I feel like a film isn't for everybody, I have to drop it a couple points, even if I enjoyed it. So that's why I was flirting between a 6 and a 7. And I ultimately stuck upon like a 6.95. I honestly think it's a 7. My heart says it's a 7, but I completely get why people don't like this movie, because surrealist films aren't from everybody. But if you're curious, I honestly think you should give this film a shot. The acting is great. The soundtrack is phenomenal. The lead actress, Celesta Dalla Porta, she did a phenomenal job. I think it's well acted. You have Gary Oldman. It's phenomenal. It's a great. I honestly think you would get a lot from it. I'm biased. I'm aware of that. It talks about anthropology. Did that freaking make its way in my ear and just make me like this film more? It probably did. Don't listen to me. I'm just kidding. Honestly, I think it's like 6.95. That's, Those are my thoughts on that. Thank you so much for checking out this AZRay video. Don't forget to like and subscribe. Leave a comment below. And I hope you enjoyed this. And even if you didn't enjoy it, thanks for watching. Take it easy, guys.